Welcome back to another deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're jumping into something super frustrating. I think pretty much everyone who writes runs into it.
Huh.
Writer's block.
Oh, yeah, that wall.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we're specifically looking at how it hits, in academic writing, research, places where the pressure feels, well, different. Higher stakes, maybe.
Definitely. It's this funny thing because from the outside, academic work seems all logic and facts, right? Gather info, structure it, write it down, simple.
If only.
Right. Anyone actually doing it knows it's way more tangled up with your head, your feelings, even your confidence, hitting that point where words just stop. It's not you failing. It's just, well, part of a really demanding process sometimes.
That's a relief to hear,
Yeah.
honestly. Yeah, for this deep dive, we're not just throwing out random tips. We've been digging into the Academic Practices Instagram account.
Yeah, they have some great stuff.
They really do.
Yeah.
Really practical, kind of research-backed ways to deal with this. So our mission today is to unpack some of those strategies from that source, give you some concrete things to try when you feel stuck.
Sounds good. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So the first big point from academic practices, and it's really key, is that writer's block isn't just one thing.
Right, it's not monolithic.
Exactly. It shows up differently for different people or even for the same person at different times. And understanding which kind of block you've got is the crucial first step, because that tells you how to tackle it.
That makes total sense. You wouldn't use the same tool for every job. So what are some of the types they talk about?
Well, one is decision paralysis.
Okay, what's that look like?
It's like you've done all this research, you've got stacks of notes, maybe conflicting articles, too many ideas.
Information overload, basically.
Totally. You're just overwhelmed and you can't figure out where to even start or what's most important. You're paralyzed by the choices.
In there. Then what else?
Then there's what they call expressive blockage. This one's frustrating in a different way.
Oh, so?
It's when the idea is crystal clear in your head. Like, you know the argument, you see the connection, you understand the data.
What?
But you just cannot get it down on the page in that, formal academic way. Finding the right words, the structure, the precise term, it feels like hitting a brick wall between your brain and the keyboard.
Yeah. Like translation failure.
Yeah.
And I bet perfectionism is in there somewhere.
Oh, absolutely. Perfectionism-induced block. The classic. That fear, especially when you're starting something new, that the first thing you write has to be amazing.
That perfect opening line.
Exactly, or the first paragraph. You spend ages tweaking it, trying to make it flawless, and the pressure just freezes you. You're so scared of getting it wrong, you end up writing nothing.
Because you're already editing before you've even written.
Precisely. You're mixing up, creating, and critiquing. And finally, there's just plain old mental exhaustion. Yeah. Especially with long academic projects like a thesis or dissertation, sometimes the block isn't really about the writing itself. It's just you're wiped out. You literally don't have the mental energy.
So, okay. Knowing if it's too many choices, can't find the words, fear of not being perfect or just being exhausted. That's step one.
Crucial first step, yeah. Because, like you said, the fix depends on the cause. If you're burnt out, forcing yourself to free write might just make it worse,
Right. So once you kind of diagnose the type of block, what's a strategy Academic Practices suggests?
Well, one they highlight is free writing, which, as you might guess, can feel a bit weird for academic stuff.
Yeah, definitely sounds more creative writing class.
Yeah.
Academic writing feels like it needs so much structure and control.
And that's kind of the point. Sometimes that need for control kicks in way too early and just strangles the ideas. Free writing is designed to, switch off that editor brain for a bit.
So how does it work, practically speaking?
Super simple, actually. Set a timer, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, not long, and just write. Write about your topic, whatever comes to mind.
And the key is no rules.
Zero rules.
Yeah.
That's the magic. Don't worry about grammar, spelling, citations, if it makes sense, if it's even coherent. Don't stop to fix typos. Just keep the fingers moving.
The goal isn't to produce something usable then.
Not directly. Anyway, the goal is just to start the engine.
Yeah.
Warm up those writing muscles, get your brain thinking in terms of words on the page again, but without the pressure. It's about getting raw stuff out.
Just breaking the inertia.
Exactly. Especially good for that perfectionism block or just feeling stuck at the very beginning.
I can see that. Just starting is often the biggest hurdle. Okay, so that's one tool. What about tackling that feeling of being overwhelmed by the sheer size of the project?
Yes. The, oh my God, I have to write 80,000 words feeling.
Pretty much, it's paralyzing.
Right. So for that, the source suggests something called modular writing.
Modular writing. Okay, break that down.
The idea is basically chunking. You take that massive, terrifying task, the thesis chapter of the paper, and you break it down into the smallest possible little pieces. Modules.
So not just like intro, methods, results.
You start there, identify the big sections, but then you go way smaller. Inside methods, you don't just have write methods, you have tiny tasks.
Like what?
Like, describe the participant sample in 200 words. Or explain data analysis technique X in one paragraph. Or list the survey questions used, really small, really specific things. Maybe only 100 words, 300 words max.
So they feel achievable, not scary.
Exactly. And the strategy is to focus on just completing one of those little modules in a writing session. Maybe 2 if you're feeling good.
Ah, so you're not aiming to finish the whole chapter. You're aiming to finish that one tiny piece.
Precisely. And every time you check one off, you get this little hit of accomplishment, you see progress, it builds momentum. Suddenly the huge mountain looks more like a series of small, manageable steps.
That's a great mental shift. From feeling like a failure for not finishing the whole thing to feeling successful for finishing a small part. I like that.
What's next from academic practices?
Okay, next up is about setting the stage, sort of training yourself. It's developing a writing ritual.
Like, habits.
Yeah, exactly. They use the analogy of an athlete warming up. You can create cues that tell your brain, okay, it's time to focus in right now.
What kind of cues work?
Could be anything, really, as long as it's consistent. Maybe like 5 minutes of deep breathing or a quick meditation right before you start.
Right.
Or putting on a specific playlist, one you only use for writing.
Oh, yeah. I know people who swear by that. Or writing at the same time every day.
That's a classic one, time blocking. Or even having a dedicated space, this chair, this corner of the desk that is only for writing. Nothing else happens there.
And the consistency is the key part.
Absolutely. Over time, your brain starts to associate that ritual, that time, that place, that music, whatever it is, with the act of focused writing.
So it helps you transition into the right mindset more easily. That's the idea. It can kind of smooth the path into the writing session and maybe even stop the block from forming in the first place because you've created this predictable trigger for focus.
Makes sense. Building supportive habits.
Okay, what about the loneliness factor? Academic work can feel really isolating sometimes, which probably doesn't help writer's block.
That's a huge point the source makes. Isolation definitely makes it worse. When you're struggling alone, it's easy to think, it's just me. I'm uniquely bad at this.
Yeah, that spiral. So what's the strategy? Connection.
Connection and accountability. Finding a writing partner or maybe joining a small writing group.
Like people working on similar projects.
Doesn't have to be similar projects, just people also trying to write. You can set goals together, maybe weekly check-ins. What are you going to get done this week?
Accountability, right.
Yeah. Or even just doing like silent writing sessions together. You jump on a video call, say hi, then everyone mutes and just works for an hour or two. Just knowing other people are there also working.
Creates a sense of shared effort. Totally. It builds that accountability, gives you motivation, fosters discipline because you've committed to showing up, and crucially, it just smashes that feeling of isolation. You see others are in the same boat.
That community aspect feels really important. Okay, but let's be real. Some days, even with rituals and buddies, sitting down to actually write feels like climbing Everest in flip-flops. Just impossible.
Totally. And academic practices is realistic about that. For those days, they suggest you approach writing indirectly. Meaning you still engage with your project, you still move it forward, but without the direct pressure of actually composing new sentences.
Okay, so what does that look like? Reading?
Reading-related articles, yeah. Maybe specifically looking for how others structured their arguments or finding sources for a section you know you need to write later.
Or like tidying up your notes, making an outline, mind mapping.
Exactly. Organizing your thoughts. Or listening to a relevant talk or seminar online. Even just talking about your ideas or where you're stuck with someone, a colleague, a friend.
So you're still immersed in the topic, still thinking about it, just not typing new paragraphs.
Right. You're keeping the mental gears turning on your research, keeping it active in your mind without that specific pressure of producing text, which might be the thing causing the block that day. It prepares the ground for when you are ready to write again.
That's such a valuable reframe of what productive time looks like. It's not just word count. Okay, shifting gears a bit.
Yeah.
What about that voice inside your head? The critic.
The inner critic. Yeah, the source points to this as a major, major culprit behind writer's block, especially perfectionism, but also just general expressive blockage.
That constant nagging, is this any good? Is this original? Am I making sense?
All of that. And the crucial insight here from academic practices is about needing to separate the different phases of writing.
Phases.
Yeah, they talk about two distinct modes. There's the creative production mode. That's the brainstorming, drafting, getting ideas down, making a mess, basically. First draft energy.
Okay. And the other?
The critical evaluation mode. That's the editing, refining, structuring, checking facts, polishing, making it clear and coherent. Editor energy.
And the problem is trying to wear both hats at the same time.
Bingo. If you try to edit while you're still trying to generate ideas, the critic just shuts the creator down. You start judging sentences before they're even finished.
So the rule is?
Produce first, critique later. Period. Give yourself permission to write a truly terrible first draft. Just get it out, then put on your editor hat and go back to shape it. Keep those processes separate.
Easier said than done, maybe, but conceptually that makes a ton of sense for shutting down the perfectionist freeze. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground identifying types. Starting, breaking it down, rituals, partners, indirect work, silencing the critic. What's the final strategy? Feels like we need something about acceptance.
You read my mind. That's exactly it. The final piece of advice is about learning to allow it.
Allow the block.
Yeah, except that, look, even if you do everything right, writer's block might still happen sometimes, and the source emphasizes that's okay. It's not a sign you failed.
It's not a moral issue.
Not at all. It's part of the natural rhythm of doing hard, creative, intellectual work. The suggestion is to try and reframe it. See it as part of the process, not an obstacle to the process.
So giving yourself permission, maybe?
Exactly. Permission's like, okay, I can't seem to write today. That's all right. That's part of how this works sometimes.
Or maybe I'm stopping now, even though I didn't finish what I planned. I'll try again tomorrow.
Yeah. Or even thinking, maybe my brain needs this pause. Maybe it's busy working things out in the background. Allowing for that downtime without guilt.
That sounds revolutionary almost. Cutting out the guilt factor.
It's huge because paradoxically, accepting the block and being kind to yourself about it often helps it pass faster. Beating yourself up just adds another layer of stress that keeps you stuck. Self-compassion is actually a really practical tool here. So yeah, pulling all these threads from academic practices together. The big picture is that writer's block, especially in academia, isn't just something you grit your teeth and push through. It's more complex. It needs like psychological awareness, flexibility, and using the right strategy for the specific problem.
Right. These aren't just, generic just right tips. They're grounded approaches drawn from how people actually work and think, aimed at the specific pressures of academic writing.
Right.
Ways to navigate when you really feel stuck.
And I think a final really important takeaway from the source is this idea that productivity isn't solely measured by words on the page today. It's also about building the foundations, the mental habits, the support systems, the self-awareness, the coping strategies that keep you going for the long haul.
That really broadens the definition of being a productive writer, doesn't it? It's not just output. It's also sustainability.
Exactly. Sustainability. So maybe something for you to think about is, how does that idea change how you might approach your next writing session? What does building that foundation look like for you?
Definitely food for thought. Hope this deep dive helps you find your flow again. Thanks for tuning in.